right, listen up. We are back with another episode of the Construction Mentor Podcast. My name is Ike. I am your host. Why are we here? We are here to promote the construction industry as a viable path to affluence. There's no other industry that gives you a better opportunity to get a reward for the work that you put in. At a minimum, the return on investment in this industry, the return for your hard work, is going to be linear, meaning you put in 1 unit of hard work, you're going to get 1 unit of reward in return. What I believe is that if you have the right mentorship and the right tools at your disposal, that return is going to be exponential. In other words, for every unit of hard work you put in, then you'll get 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 10 units of reward for that hard work. So that's what we're here to do. We're here to promote that opportunity and to provide the mentorship, to provide the tools to you so that you can take your career to the next height. Today, I want to talk about culture in the construction world. So one of the common things or common themes that you will see, whether you step into the subcontractor world or the general contractor world, is that the subcontractors hate superintendents. When I say superintendent, I'm referring to the superintendents for the general contractors. Now, what is a superintendent? A superintendent is the quarterback on the field for the general contractor. They are the maestro. They are calling the plays on the field. They're throwing the ball to the wide receivers. They're handing the ball off to the running backs, and they're calling the blocking schemes at the line of scrimmage, right? So if you don't like football, what does that mean? That means that they are the field general. Everything that happens on the field is at their direction, basically. They are solely responsible, or they are the lead person responsible for the success of a project in the field from a quality perspective, from a schedule perspective, and from a cost overrun perspective. And for a lot of reasons, a lot of subcontractors hate, and I literally mean hate, the superintendents. Now, let's go over the perceptions. There's a few perceptions that I'll skim over. Number one is a zero-sum game. People think that it's a zero-sum game, that the superintendents, they feel as though that they have to win and everybody else has to lose. They feel as though that they are setting people up to fail, right? Which we'll talk about that. They feel like they use information against people and hold it against them and use it to basically hang them out to dry. And they just feel that they're plain stupid. Now, from the subcontractor's perspective, there is one key point that subcontractors need to understand, that they have a bias. And I'll go into it, and I'm going to take the subcontractor side several times throughout this episode. But one of the things that you need to understand about your bias as a subcontractor, so when you're a subcontractor and you're looking at the general contractor team, specifically the superintendent, you have an implicit bias there. Why is that? When you look at the general contractor, whoever's awarding you the work, whether that's a purchasing manager or an estimator for the general contractor, that is somebody that is making you money, right? They are awarding you work. You're getting contracts. You're getting revenue from that source. The people in the operations, the project manager, and specifically the superintendent, can only lose you money at that point. Anything that they ask you to do is literally going to affect your profit margins. So you now have a bias because everything that comes out of their mouth is the negative impacts of whatever comes out of their mouth is going to be amplified in your brain. Okay, so let's just say that first and foremost. And I've been on both sides. I've worked on the HVAC subcontracting side, and I've been on the general contractor side as pretty much at every level of management, from super or assistant super all the way up to now a director. So I totally understand both sides of the aisle, both sides of the argument. So I'm going to go through each of these perceptions, and I'm going to say what the general contractor should be doing, and you as a subcontractor, what you could be doing to manage that situation, even if the project super is just being a dickhead, which can totally happen. All right, so let's go over the first one. Number one, a zero-sum game. Now, this is a very common perception. The idea that the superintendent for the general contractor is set out to win, and in order for them to win, they feel like they have to make everybody else lose. Now, I will say that I have seen that mentality, or I've even gotten that impression from people as I work with them, but not the good ones. That's not how most people work. Number one, it's counterintuitive for you to think that somebody's sole purpose in life is to go out there and make everybody else miserable, you're valuing yourself more than they probably care about you, right? Like, people have a lot of stuff going on in their life. They have a home life, they have a work life, they have their own goals in their career. So for you to insinuate that it's their mission to make your life miserable is probably just not a good one to have, and it's probably not an accurate one. So you may want to keep that in mind. And if they do that all the time and everybody around them loses, nobody's ever going to want to work with them again. I've never met one superintendent that hates every single subcontractor they work with. They all have their list of favorites, but they wouldn't have any favorites if they didn't feel like it was a good working relationship and it was somebody that they wanted to see, right? Or somebody that they were able to just beat up on all the time. So highly unlikely that that is the case. For them to for subcontractors to feel like they're being set up to fail by the general contractor, that doesn't really make sense either, right? So if you feel like the superintendent is always just setting you up to fail or putting you in a position where you can't possibly succeed because they don't understand your job, or they just want to make your life difficult, or again, they're trying to create that situation like they can only win if you lose, that doesn't really make sense either, because they have to have a successful outcome on the project from everybody. They have to have everybody meet the schedule, and they have to deliver it at a certain quality in order to satisfy their boss and their client, right? Now, whether or not your costs are satisfactory or the cost of the project is satisfactory for all parties is kind of another thing, because sometimes superintendents can cost the general contractor money too. But from a schedule and a quality standpoint, they have to have a successful project. So they have no incentive to set you up to fail. And whether you make money or lose money, it's not coming out of their personal pocket. So there is no real incentive for them to make you lose money on the project either, especially since you keep the money, right? If you make money or lose money, we're not getting it back in our pockets. Their bonus or their personal incentive plan isn't going to be boosted at the end of the year for doing that either. So it really doesn't make sense that a superintendent would want to set you up to fail. Now, using information against people. This definitely does happen. Now, I was on a podcast, the Sparky Life podcast. It used to be called, now it's called Your Construction Network, with Leah Lamella. Excellent podcast. She's an electrician. Definitely go check that out. I had the idea of this conversation originally came from that podcast, so I highly recommend you go check out the conversation. It came out on February 6th, 2025. And she felt as though that the superintendent that she was working with, although she was well-intended to share certain information, she felt like the super basically used it to flip it against her. They leveraged that against her office to basically strong-arm them into doing certain things. And this is something that's happened to me, even as a general contractor, superintendent myself, or a project manager. When we share information with people, whether it's our client or subs below us or vendors or whoever that may be, architects, engineers, inspectors, anybody, oftentimes the people with the best intentions can try to be transparent because they feel like their transparency is them being a collaborator, is them being trustworthy, is them being authentic, and they expect that to be reflected back to them. And when they don't, it burns. Right? So when you share something with a superintendent, or you give them insight, or you kind of show them behind the curtain to what you're working with, and then they use that against you, that burns. And that's a common thing that we always see, right? And this is really where the first two stem from. So the people that feel like the superintendent's after a zero-sum game, or he wants people to fail, or he wants to use information against them to hold them out to dry, a lot of that comes from being burned in the past. Now, the first thing, whether you're a sub or a GC, that you should try to do is try to be a coffee bean. This industry is tough. It can ruin you. You can't let it ruin you. You gotta keep that positive attitude. If you're sharing information because you want to be a collaborator and you want to develop good relationships and you want to be authentic and you want everybody to win and you want everybody to feel like they're playing on the same team to win, just running into somebody one time that seems to have a zero-sum game in mind, or that wants to set you up to fail, or that does use that against you, your information against you that you shared with them in good faith, You don't want to let that burn you to the point where you have a scar and that changes you, and then other people that you work with, you don't want to collaborate with them. You hold information back. You make them feel like they're in a zero-sum game or like you're setting them up to fail because you winning is the only priority and the only option out there. You don't want to make that the case either. And I always use the coffee bean method. And if you go look at the coffee bean, that book by Damon West, The Change Agent is the name of the book, but he has a metaphor in there about being a coffee bean when he was in prison and he ended up getting out. But that metaphor is that there's a carrot, there's an egg, and there's a coffee bean. And if you put them in a high pressure, high temperature situation, which is what we're in construction, three things can happen. Either that carrot becomes mush, right? And we can kind of become mush and we can become soft if we get beat up too much. Or it can be an egg, again, in high pressure, high temperature, boiling water. And what happens to the egg? It gets hard boiled, right? So you get that hard exterior and you can block people out and you can't let people in and you're kind of abrasive, right? So the construction industry can certainly do that, and I think it does that to more people than not. Or you can be a coffee bean. And what does a coffee bean do when it gets thrown in boiling water, high temperature, high pressure environment? It changes the environment around it. It changes the water into coffee. You want to always err towards being a coffee bean, and we'll talk about how to do that in the second 10, 20 minutes of this podcast. I'm going to try to keep it under a half hour here. But you don't ever want to have a bad experience change you or make you worse of a person to make you into that mushy carrot or that hard-boiled egg, okay? Maybe you're a little more careful and calculated when you share information with somebody, and maybe you approach them in a different manner the next time, or the next time you come up to that crusty old super or somebody that is a little abrasive or makes everybody around them feel like they're in a zero-sum game. How can you approach them to better work with them? That's the question, right? So let's talk about that. And we're going to transition, we're going to segue into talking about that by talking about the fourth conception that subcontractors have on their superintendents or regarding their superintendents on the general contractor side, and it's that they are stupid, that they don't know what they're doing or they don't know what they're talking about. And what's funny is I think if you look at the average age of a superintendent in the construction industry, it's probably somewhere between 45 and 60 years old. A lot of these guys have been around for a long time. A lot of young people don't want to be supers, and it's actually causing these guys to hang around into 65, 70, even 75 years old. So they may not be rocket scientists, but they've probably been around the block. They've probably seen a few things, and they're probably not stupid. The question is why are they asking you, or why are they treating you the way that they are, right? And this is a two-way street. A lot of superintendents that are short-sighted or don't have a very collaborative or empathetic mindset, they can also look at the subcontractors and think that they're stupid. So any of the things that I'm about to say could be a conducive mindset or conducive tools for either side. So what do we need to do? Really what we have here is a failure to communicate. The subcontractors feel like the superintendents are out there to burn them and to screw them because they don't understand what the general contractor, specifically the superintendent's job is. They don't understand what constraints they have. They don't understand what client requirements that they have. They don't understand what budgetary requirements they have. They don't understand how the estimator on the general contractor team missed something in their scope, and now they have to try and get the superintendent to get it covered without bringing any added costs to the client or taking costs from their profit margin, right? And that's a two-way street. The superintendent doesn't understand what the office, as a lot of subcontractors call it, is telling them. Did they miss something? Are they on several jobs? Are they strapped for manpower and they need to delay until they finish one project so they can get over to this project? And really what we have here, so we'll go down each of these, but it's a failure to communicate. So if you are a general contractor and your sub is being difficult and they're being abrasive and they're trying to block you out, they're acting like that egg, then you need to ask them. You need to educate yourself on what could be going on behind their curtain. And if you're a subcontractor, if you're a foreman or a project manager, this is the time where you need to educate yourself on what's going on in your GC's world. So the first could be budget constraints. right? What was bought? What's on the contract? Are you even both aware of what was negotiated in the contract? Because you, the foreman for the subcontractor, probably didn't even get a copy of the contract that you executed with the general contractor. The superintendent for the general contractor probably never has read the contract. And even if they did, they didn't shop for those groceries. They didn't come up with that recipe for that meal. They're stuck with it. So how do you guys get together and make that work in a scenario where you guys both win and you guys both look good to the people that you report to, your clients, your vendors, and in a way that makes everybody want to work with you again? So you want to ask what those things are, and you want to be able to fish those things out. And that's a skill that takes time, but the best way to do it is to have a good relationship that you see people over and over again. So we'll talk about that. The next one could be inspectors or the AHJ, right? Authority holding jurisdiction. Maybe if you're a GC looking at your sub, the sub knows what the tendencies are or the bugaboos are to satisfy the local inspector, especially for their niche. Like, nobody knows the electrical inspectors better than the electricians, right? That always call for their inspections. They usually have the personal relationship. They know the do's and don'ts. You want to draw that out of them if there is that information. What a lot of the subs don't understand is what the general contractor, what their inspections have to be and when they have to be, and what those requirements are, and those relationships are exactly the same way. So you want to educate each other and try to ask each other about what the inspection processes are, what's ideal, what needs to be scheduled, how much notice needs to be in there, what the process is. And you should have a meeting to do that, but you want to be collaborative about that. Then you obviously have your client restraints, requirements. And this is where the big disconnect is, because those things may or may not have been communicated to the super for the GC. Maybe they weren't even thought about, and now the super is learning about it as he already has a job that's contracted entirely with the subs and with the client, and now he has to make it work within the client's constraints, or he has to make their dream happen. Maybe the job has to happen at night. Maybe they can only work in certain hours because of certain things happening in the building. Maybe they can only shut down power and access to certain areas at certain times because of the function of the building. Maybe the client requires certain approvals and mock-ups and samples and all of those types of things before they approve anything, or before something can happen on the schedule, or before a certain material can be bought. And maybe that's causing you to work out of sequence. And maybe that's the reason that the sub is frustrated, because they don't understand why they have to go second in line when they usually are first in line, or they have to be third in line when usually they're last. There could be reasons for all these things, and if it doesn't make sense to you, or if you know it's atypical, number one, you should be communicating that to the GC, asking why, making suggestions like, hey, I typically don't do it this way. Usually we like to do it this way. Is there a reason why we can't? Because maybe the GC will say, you know what, you're right, that's a really good idea. Or maybe they'll educate you and say, well, we have this restraint. I can't do this. I can't come in tomorrow night because, there's a big event or something like that. And you go, oh, okay, I get it. So those are things that you want to communicate, and you want to ask questions. The way you ask questions, you want to be careful of your tone. Obviously, you don't want to be abrasive when you say it or call anybody an idiot or anything like that, but you just want to simply say, hey, I don't usually do it this way. I would suggest doing it this way. Is there a reason that we can't? And if there is something that you didn't know about, the GC turns around to you and they say, you know what? I could use some help with the logistics here. This is what I want to do. You didn't know about it, but maybe you have a better suggestion, right? Maybe you come up with that together on the fly. That's a really good situation to be in. The other thing that people don't realize is the downstream effects on the subs. So supers are really good at having one-on-one communication with somebody and telling people what they have to do and expecting them to march or to jump when they say jump. They want the subs to say how high. And the subs have that tunnel vision of, I'm only talking to this guy. I have to coordinate with this guy. I want to operate the way that I want to operate, the most efficient way, the way that doesn't waste my time, makes my company the most money, gets me the biggest bonus, whatever, right? But the super on the GC has to handle 15, 25, 30 trades. And what you're doing now may affect somebody 5 trades away, somebody that's not even going to be on site for another 2 months, and they're not telling you that. They're not educating you on your effect of somebody else downstream. So, again, if there's a reason, or if there's something that you don't like and you want to know the reason why, that could be another reason. And if you're a super on a GC, this is why you have to have in-person coordination meetings. You have to pull all the players in, even if they have a small role or even if they're loosely affiliated. You want to bring them in so that they have an opportunity to speak or bring something to everybody's attention. Because I've been in there. I've been in those rooms where you got the carpenter, you got the electrician, you got the plumber, you got the tin knocker doing overhead coordination. And one of the subs is like, man, why am I here? I shouldn't even be here. This has nothing to do with me. And lo and behold, half hour into the meeting, he's like, oh, wait a minute. I need that spot in the ceiling because I have something that has to go there. Well, you got all the people in the room right there. You can come up with a win-win-win scenario for everybody. And usually as long as everybody has the right attitude and everyone's asking questions with the right tone, everybody walks out of that meeting feeling good. So you want to do that. And then you have the upstream effect on subs, basically before and after you, but you also have the upstream effect on the client. What is important to them when they walk in, right? Why is security to a certain space a certain way? Why does the temperature have to be maintained in a certain space a certain way? What type of foot traffic do they have? What type of people, and how is the furniture being used, and how does that have to be maintained, and how often are the doors being opened and closed, and what is the traffic like, and what does the maintenance look like, and what is their work process and their business process work like, and why does it matter to you? Right? I had a client recently that demanded heavy gauge doors on a retail store, prison grade doors. And none of the subcontractors understood why. None of the team on the GC understood why. And the reason why was because they have so much traffic and they open and close so often that a lower gauge door or a flimsier door, a typical door and frame, would crack and break. And it actually couldn't handle the traffic as much, right? So communicating those things and educating everybody is a great way to do it. And ultimately, what you want to do, whether you're that sub trying to manage up to a difficult super or you are a super trying to manage down to a difficult sub, you want to make it clear what the goal is. Stated at the beginning, stated in the middle, stated at the end. You are out for a win-win-win scenario for everybody. So if you're dealing with that grumpy old super and you're trying to ask questions to educate yourself on how is he restrained in his budget, what's his client requirements, what's his schedule and logistics restraints, you want to do that and ask questions in a way that's like, how do I help you succeed and make you shine? And oh, by the way, here's what I have in my mind and what would make me successful in this project. How can we both align those so that we both come out with a win? I've never met anybody that if you approach them like that, they would react in a negative way. Okay, so again, we have a failure to communicate, and the best way around it, or the best way to have that collaborative approach and not be in a situation where you feel like you're in a zero-sum game or somebody's setting you up to fail or they're trying to use information against you or like you feel like they're stupid or you know they feel like you're stupid, is to communicate and to educate. Now, again, the best way to do this is and this is a muscle. This is a very important thing. You have to be disciplined about this approach, and you have to work this like a muscle. But every time somebody tells you something that you don't want to hear, you want to make your knee-jerk reaction to be, they must know something I don't. You're not moving fast enough. You're behind schedule. Okay. You must know something I don't. You can't put that up in the ceiling over there. You can't take that real estate up there. Your light fixture can't fit in the wall there. Your ductwork can't be that deep or that tall. Well, you must know something that I don't, right? And again, it could be the client, it could be the inspectors, it could be the budget, it could be any of the above, right? But if you work that muscle and always assume that they know something that you don't, not just in construction, by the way, this is anything in life. When that's your knee-jerk reaction and you've turned that into a trigger that you can rely on, then your impulse is to ask questions, right? Your impulse is to ask questions, and your impulse is to ask questions with a tone that doesn't say you're stupid or you're being a nuisance or I'm trying to set you up to fail or I'm trying to hang you out to dry and use information against you, right? It's a collaborative tone. It's just a natural thing that comes after the question or the assumption in your brain that they must know something that you don't, right? So that's what you want to do. And when you keep doing that, you're going to end up seeing the same subs over and over and over again, especially on interior renovation projects or service projects, which is what I personally like, because I don't want to work with one team, one architect, one client, one set of subs for 2-3 years at a time in a big core and shell project. That's just not my personality. It's one of the things that I love about the interiors of the small renovations and additions is that you may see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects in a year. Last year I did 30. And you may have opportunities to see an electrician on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects, or whatever subcontractor on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects. Or if you're a sub, the same super on 2, 3, 4, 5 projects, right? And the best way to develop this conducive relationship is to get the repetitions and play more games with somebody, right? So you know what the rules are, you know what people play, you can get that, you can kind of gel and get those intangibles going between you guys, and that's how you build trust. That's ultimately what we're all after. We want to trust one another, that we have each other's best interest to create a win-win-win scenario for each other, and the best way to do that is to stack wins. So if I do 5 projects in a year with the same sub, or over a 2 to 3 year period even, and they've won 4 out of 5 times, that's a pretty good track record, right? And then you can say, hey, I'm the GC looking at the sub. Hey man, I screwed up on this one. I need you to cover my ass. Can you make this go away for me? Can you absorb the costs on this and make this go away? Because I'm in a really tight spot here. Okay, I'll get you in the next one. And then on the next one, you, the GC, say, hey, you can get a little more on this change order here. I'll take care of you because you took care of me before. And the same thing on the subs. Hey, man, I'm in a tough spot here. I overbooked. I'm way over my skis right now. I'm too committed to too many jobs. Can you hold off for a week? If you hold off for a week, I'll give you double the manpower, or whatever that may be. The more times you see somebody and the more wins that you can create for one another, the better record you have, the better the locker room is going to be, right? So those are the relationships that we want to foster. And it's easy to see why people come to the conclusions, or they have these biases, right? That people aren't a zero-sum game, that they're stupid, or, that they're out there to screw everybody. But honestly, it just doesn't make sense. And if you come in with that collaborative approach and you always assume that you have that key muscle to make the assumption that they know something you don't, and you need to pursue the truth, with diplomacy and with their best interest and your best interest in mind, and ultimately the client's best interest in mind, the end user, then that's how everybody wins. So, listen, I hope everybody found this valuable. If you're new and young and you're coming into the industry, this is a very important episode for you. You don't want to get burned. You don't want to get scarred by the industry. When people talk about an industry that is laden with stress and people being overworked and people that are miserable, it's people that have just been burned due to poor communication and education and the wrong approach, the wrong triggers in their brain when to collaborate and how to collaborate the right way. So don't let that happen to you. Eventually, you will run into an asshole, and you can't let that ruin you. You never want to become that egg or that carrot. You always want to be that coffee bean. In an industry where people need it, people will gravitate to you more, even if you're less experienced or you're new to the industry or you kind of don't really know what you're doing. You're a little green, right? If you have that right mindset and that right approach, people will gravitate towards a coffee bean. And what happens when people want to work with somebody? What happens when people get referrals and they want to see people again, and they get excited to see people again, and they want to perform for those people? And when people perform for you, you win, they win. That's how you get bonuses. That's how you get raises. That's how you get promoted to the next level, because people see you as somebody that can lead a team, that can lead collaboration, that can take a group of misfits or difficult personalities and bring them into a locker room together and find a way to win in a way that everybody wins, everybody's profitable, and the client's happy at the end of the day. So very, very, very important. And if you're an older person in the industry, this could be a valuable reset for you. I've worked with a lot of older people in the industry, and having this approach, I've had young people tell me, or older people tell me that are twice my age, superintendents, when I was a project manager, they'd look at me, I'd walk in the job trailer, and they'd say, I hate project managers. You're not my boss. I'll let you know when I need you. Okay, I just smile back, and I assume they know a lot of things that I don't because they've been around longer than I have. And, I try to educate them on what I know. I try to educate myself on what they know, what their pain points are, and I try to support them. And that's what makes them want to see me again. And I've never, with that approach, I don't want to say never, but very few superintendents that I haven't wanted to see and that haven't wanted to see me for a second time, at least. So, with that, this is the Construction Mentor Podcast. My name is Ike. I'm here to help. I'm here to inspire. I'm here to provide mentorship and networks, to help people take their career, either the first step in their career or take it to the next level. So appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time. You can catch me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at The Construction Mentor. And this podcast is pretty much being spread on all major platforms now: LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, X. It's all out there, man. Snapchat. So I'll see you next time.